you know, like they're like these statistics are gonna like get on you.
Yeah, so like the people doing climate change work are.
Oh yeah, it's fun. Yeah. Are you heading out?
No, I'll be around.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, really good to see you. Yeah.
Yeah, like kind of that part.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. 35 minutes away. Yeah, no, we got a nice.
Yeah, it's fun.
I was gonna say when you come back, but you're like.
Yeah.
I post. Are you, do you live in?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll follow up with you. It's something I have a question for you. Like I've been like trying to get an environment post. And I just, you know. I presented on much later, so I guess.
So, yeah.
There's no. No, you try to part of it here.
Yeah.
You thought I was curious, like waiting on there. Did you have any thoughts? You're not gonna be able to. But do you have, I mean, I seem like why can't you sort of.
We're doing, so at the public. Like, we don't get very honest, we do like. That happens very often. Yeah. We talk about your land, get money. I don't know if you're gonna throw that project, anything like that, so.
Yeah.
But I know they are doing some $7 million line, and they're, yeah, it's different, right? Setting surveillance platforms that we have like going and launching. The future of community era of whatever we get those settings and when they what they're doing, I have to go do it, but yeah, even just keep in touch about it. It's kind of like informal and stuff. In terms of my collaborate, so when I'm looking at it, yeah, they're we can all work together. I'm always trying to think of just going on. We can go there and sell it out. Oh, say what you're going to do. Where we are, we've done a good job, I think, convincing them with the utility of WaSH and some environmental air question instead of especially like environmental air. As well.
Yeah.
I think we're good. I think it's fine. I can't remember which folder I'm supposed to save it in, so I have to wait for the guys to come back. They just went in there.
You know, they just, I mean, they basically, they're kind of like, well, you know, Washington works, so like, what they do when I just look like, pass that, like, pass that meeting.
Once you get yours out. Mine is on there somewhere. I'm gonna say some goodbye to some people as soon as the session's over. I'm gonna run.
Okay. Wait, are you going?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you got another day, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, there's the guy.
Yes.
Show you.
Thank you.
Mine is like rival this UNC.
Okay. Where do I need to save this?
Sorry.
So this is on my USB. Where do I need to save it?
Yeah.
Oh, this is your USB right here.
Yeah.
I was happy that we didn't find any.
Yeah. I'll find you. Yeah.
Thursday.
But yeah, no.
And this is red, but
Okay.
this one?
Yep. Okay,
And
and there's another one.
is this one of yours? Or?
That's mine, yeah. That's the one. I just
It might, if you opened it off of this drive, it might not. Yes, it might.
That's
so
fine.
Is it okay if I close it?
Yep, yep.
Is this
That one, yeah.
Okay, so
Then we got another one to put on there. This, no. Yes? Yeah, that one.
vertical session. And then I would open them both just to double check. Thanks, man.
Ooh, and then my one. Ooh. Is it supposed to be appearing on the screen?
What is it? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, I heard you good.
Sorry.
Anyway, I'm.
Okay. Yes. Give me one moment. That shoots up with okay. Thank you. Set up some show. And do you know what file it is?
That's the, let's see. Yeah, that's one.
The second one?
Yeah, once we wash up.
Very fast. Of course. Okay. I see. So this probably is the old one from the 22nd.
Yeah,
Okay, so I'll just. right now.
yeah, I can just preview that just to make sure. Yeah, those are the correct speakers.
And external.
Yeah, I can't get rid of those animations, so
Okay,
I am animated now.
I like it. That is backwards. Slideshow, primary monitor. So monitor would be that one, I think. There we
Great.
go.
But yeah, I'll be-
Okay, perfect. All right, slideshow.
Is it this one here?
Yeah. It's like opening and full screen on this one. So wait, where did you get that menu from?
Set up slideshow, and then you just want it to be presented by speaker.
Okay.
It was set on browse by an individual.
Okay, that's interesting. And that's like by slideshow to slideshow that changes?
Um,
Because the other ones opened up fine.
fine, yeah,
Okay, that's good to know.
yeah, maybe that. Because we were trying to figure out that before. Like, this does not carry. I mean, this if you change this carries over to all of them that are like get opened. But I guess the show type does not.
Okay. And then the monitor is right to be monitor too?
Yeah, monitor 2 is the NP as the projector. Yeah.
Perfect. And then I screen shared, right? I'm assuming.
Yeah, we're seeing. Yeah.
Monitor do a part.
So I'm gonna give you 3 minutes, so yeah, let's stop at 12, so we have 3 minutes left. Yeah, stop that. If I hear you kind of like slowing down, I'm trying to think, I'm not gonna stop it.
I haven't recipe yet.
I think we're missing one.
stop them, like, and they do just kind of slow and check questions, but it's not like you can't talk to them afterwards. So, yeah, and that's the thing, I wanted to do this. Yeah. Yeah, but it's, I mean, it's certainly. It's a bit. Okay. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's changed. Gracie. I am, yes. Are you facilitating or are you also presenting?
Hello, I'm Chris.
And is it?
Yes. Oh, yeah, I saw it, yeah. So you're in school now.
So Christine was actually leading the project that I'm presenting on today for as a very well today. Good adjustment.
I'm in the, my stuff's in the Google Drive. So is that in here? Do I?
Oh, yeah, if wherever you got it,
I just uploaded it to where they told me to upload it, to the conference. The conference Google Drive.
do you have a copy somewhere else?
They told me to upload it to the drive.
Interesting. You're the first person who's told me that. So,
Can I email it to somebody? I don't have a thumb drive.
you can. Oh wait, you can just. Yeah, that'll work.
Oh shit.
You're fine. We got time. Huh? Oh no, sorry. You're good. We're good. I was gonna stall for a few minutes anyway, so. You can, if you want to email it to, or just if you want to, here, I'll just log it.
Yeah, it's this one. Okay, so what should I do? Should I? Do you want me just to shoot it over to?
You can send it. I mean, I can just log into my. Yeah.
No, I have a flash drive. I'm just my computer isn't recognizing it right now.
That looks like the receiver for
Oh,
like,
there we go. That's my way. Let's try again.
that'll do it. And you can plug that back into the laptop.
Like, well, that's a bummer. This was the easier way. All right, I uploaded my stuff to the conference.
Yeah, it's been a little. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's in the Google Drive.
Is there a drive?
Oh, the
Drive
Google
somewhere?
Drive. Yeah, we don't have access to that.
You're fine. Don't worry. We got a couple minutes to.
But at least now the flash drive should work.
Okay. Let's see if it's on there.
That's the PDF.
It's a PDF, yeah.
Gotcha.
She'll put up the stop at the 12-minute mark. And then
And is
if you
there a
go,
1 minute, or
if you,
is there-
yeah, there's 3, 1, and stop. So yeah.
That's weird.
Is it not?
It's saying it's not recognized. What if I get rid of that? No. Did you make changes from this? Is this it?
That's good enough. I'm sure. Yeah, that's it. That's it. But I don't know why there would be 2 in there.
Okay, so you have to go.
Yeah,
And then
PDFs
just-
it's
can you just
weird.
do
You have to take it all the way
presentation
over.
mode?
Yep, give me just a second to see everything at a 90-degree angle. Okay, and are you the first presenter?
Yes.
Okay, sweet. That makes things easy.
All right. Thank you very much for your help.
Yeah, not a problem. Oh, whoops. There we go. And clicker.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. This session is WaSH in Schools, and up first we have Chris Nicoletti. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. It's weird that you're all back in that corner, but it's great to have you all here Thursday afternoon, day 4 in the afternoon. So we'll see. Louder? Okay. So my name is Chris Nicoletti. I work at an organization called Splash as the Chief Impact Officer, which means I have this cool privilege of helping people make better decisions with data and evidence. And at Splash, a lot of those decisions relate to implementing WaSH in schools at pretty significant scale. So at Splash, we have a pretty ambitious project that we call Project WISE, where we are trying to work in 100% of schools in some major urban cities, initially in Kolkata and Addis Ababa, then shifting to Addis Ababa and Bahir Dar. And to date, we have worked in about 94% of schools in Addis Ababa, totaling in excess of 600,000 students, in nearly 900,000 students globally under Project WISE. And the context of the presentation I'm giving today is that the often not talked about challenge with WaSH in schools is operations and maintenance. So we spend a lot of time, or more time, talking about BC and infrastructure, but how does that get maintained over time? So that's what we're going to talk about. Before doing so, just a little bit of context, and I won't spend too much time on this because Sarah is actually going to be presenting some of this in a little bit. But Project WISE, about 94% of schools, 99% of those schools have received the entire package of both infrastructure, behavior change, MH interventions. We've kind of continuously refined our approach to BC and MH over time based on feedback and data, as well as conversations with students, staff, their peers. And we've seen some pretty significant results in the form of hand washing, as well as some self-reported respiratory illness, which Sarah will talk more about. So I'm going to go quickly through this part. And then I think a big part of this, as it relates to O&M, or operations and maintenance, is that we've brought in a significant amount of co-funding, both from other donors, like foundations and kind of fundraising type donors, but also in the form of government co-investment. And that is kind of a key aspect of operations and maintenance, as most of us, I think, know or will know by the end of this presentation, hopefully. And then in addition, we've seen some pretty significant cost efficiency gains over time. So to put this into context of our project, we try to increase hand washing behavior, we try to increase self-efficacy and ownership and improve health and well-being. That's all in the top. So that's the top part of our theory of change. But as it relates to sustainability, we really want to establish school-level operations and maintenance solutions, as well as bringing in government-level support to that effort as well. And so this study is specifically looking at that school-level intervention and what is the most cost-effective and resulted in the highest performance in the city of Addis Ababa. So what did we do? The main objectives here were to test the viability of 3 different models, and specifically, these are O&M service provider models. Secondly, we wanted to really understand how school administration interacted with these and gain some qualitative feedback on how it worked. Was it successful? Was it easy? Was it frustrating? And to understand kind of the human element of each of these, because that's a really important aspect of scaling up an O&M solution across the city. And then lastly, we really wanted to inform a citywide strategy, which I'll talk about at the very end, to pitch to the city to increase, or to basically kind of increase adoption by the city and carry forward after Project WISE is completed. So the 3 models that we looked at. The first one is called, basically we call them kind of O&M technicians at the school. So these are, well, sorry, on this slide, it's hard that I don't have it here, it's only here. O&M technicians are hired by the government at the site of the school. So these are school-level technicians that are there at the school most days. The second is O&M technicians that are trained by the technical vocational schools. So in Ethiopia, they have these things called TVETs. These are the technical vocational colleges. And we linked schools with an accompanying TVET to provide that service to the school as needed. And the third model that ran concurrently is independent private sector O&M technicians. These are kind of your private sector, small businesses that can fix issues, plumbers, fix issues at the school that the school hires on their own accord for these certain maintenance requirements. We had a multi-level sampling strategy which included a random selection of 4 subcities in Addis Ababa, where we then selected 16 wardas, and we purposefully sampled sites within those wardas based on their proximity to TVETs, as well as proximity to local private sector suppliers. And I can talk afterwards about the purpose of sampling, because that's important, but I won't go into detail in these 10 minutes. We had, I'd say, while there's 4 main data sources, I'd say there's really one major one that we relied on primarily for the quantitative analysis, and that was these log sheets. So every school was equipped with a log sheet that they filled in based on the issues they had and how much it cost to fix it, how long it took to fix it, and detailed information about what the issue was and what the solution was. We then had a baseline and endline infrastructure functionality assessment, so every school included in the study. We went to at the very beginning, and then we went to at the end to understand kind of what is the whole functionality assessment at the school level, which basically corresponded to the log sheets. It's roughly the same information. In addition, we had focus group discussions and data quality reviews. In these focus group discussions was really where we understood kind of the human side of how this all works. How challenging is it to go work with a TVET, for example, or how reliable was the on-site school technician? Sorry, I'm getting an Amber Alert, which is never good. Okay, no, you're getting an Amber Alert, which is also never good. In terms of results, I think we wanted to look at 3 main things. The first was basically what types of issues and how frequently can each of these different models address issues. And so the first of those resulted in the school technicians really were able to fix a lot more issues at the school level than the TVETs or the private contractors. This chart that you see here basically is a heat map showing for each column the different models. The darker blue indicated how many issues of that type were addressed by the different models. And we found that by and large, for simpler issues, roughly 80% of issues that the schools face, local or on-site technicians were much more reliable. They could address that, and you'll see in the next slide, they could address it more quickly, but they also addressed a higher volume of them during the study period. Additionally, what we learned in the qualitative findings is that both the TVETs, but also the private contractors, not really a surprise, but they kind of waited until enough issues came to light to justify their trip to the school. And so they kind of had a bigger ticket value in going to the school, which ultimately really led to fewer issues being addressed throughout the study period. So in short, school technicians fixed more issues than TVETs and local artisans. The second aspect is we really wanted to understand costs. If we're pitching the government on a long-term budget for this, they needed to understand the cost structure and which is the most cost-effective form of O&M models. So as it relates to this, school technicians were considerably less expensive across the board, but they were also less expensive for each issue type. So if we compare apples to apples, like fixing a hand washing station, it was less expensive for the school technician to do that than the TVET and the local artisan. Thirdly, we were really interested in downtime. The longer a system or a piece of infrastructure is down, the less likely that it will continue to be used. Makes sense. But when we think about the relationship between infrastructure and behavior change, you have what can be somewhat delicate behaviors that you're trying to reinforce. And when there's not a hand washing station to be used for hand washing, you can see a behavior break down quite quickly. So as it relates to downtime, we found that on-site school technicians had much faster response and much lower downtime of systems at the school level than the other two models. And that's true across the board, but it was also true for specific issue types. And most true for common, everyday, 80% of issues that a school will face, like some leaks in the plumbing system or issues with hand washing taps. Day to day, 80% of issues could be addressed much more quickly, resulting in lower downtime when you had an on-site technician in place. The last part of this study was really reinforcing the supply chain of materials. So we wanted to make sure that schools had access to supplies for different components and that we reinforced the availability of everyday kind of nuts and bolts, so to speak, to maintain their WaSH infrastructure. And what we found is that overall, there is ready access to all of the infrastructure that Splash introduces, with the exception of a few pieces. And that was really great, but it also meant that we have a job to do to link schools with reliable suppliers, and that we will continue to have to play a role of ensuring that schools have access to a few key parts in the short term until we can establish a supply chain to those schools. So what are the recommendations? Ultimately, we intend to scale up school technicians citywide. It's important in the qualitative research that they are paid a fair wage. We saw high levels of attrition and dropout because once a school technician can become a viable plumber, they're going to go make more money on the private sector providing that service. So we need to make sure they are paid well, advocate for specific budgets with the government of Ethiopia and school administrators, link these parts suppliers with school technicians, and connect schools with TVETs for those more complicated issues. And that is ultimately where I'll end. We have a whole kind of series of next steps, which I'm happy to talk about if there's questions. But with that, I'll open it up for any questions that you all have, and Sarah will actually talk a little bit more about this from an impact perspective later on. Questions?
If you're really raising the bar for the burden of asking a question. Sorry. You might have said this at the start already. Is the technician a standalone position? And could you just talk a little bit more about where the boundaries of their role was and how that relates to maybe cleaning staff? And did they also have any role in things like menstrual waste bins or in, I don't think you were using incinerators in Ethiopia, but yeah, could you just, I guess, talk a little bit more about the boundaries of their role and if you saw there's opportunities for other bits rather than just some of the maintenance?
Yes, great question. So the school technicians are not the janitors. We do train janitors. They are part of our overall behavior change approach, and both training them on proper cleaning, very, very basic maintenance of supplies, so availability of certain supplies, for instance, is the janitor's responsibility. The technicians are kind of in between that and like a big issue that needs to be fixed by a professional, like either an engineer or kind of contractor. And so they are, in the case of the pilot, they were 1-for-1 assigned to the school. So every school had one technician. As we move forward, the actual strategy that we are introducing to the government is roughly a 5-to-1 ratio where 5 schools will share one technician and the technician will go to a school every day. That's for cost drivers, but also we realized that 1-to-1, like that the technician didn't have that much work to do if they were doing preventative maintenance per the schedule that we outlined. In terms of MH, they did not necessarily maintain waste bins. That would be more under the janitor's role. And no, there were not incinerators. Emily, correct? That's correct. Okay. That was a separate, yeah. What other questions do y'all have?
What's the comparative cost of the school technician inclusive of the salary that was paid by the government, or is that just what the school was paying?
Good question. So the comparative cost included both labor and materials costs that were brought to the table. And we set a cost for technicians equivalent to a certain percentage of the government per, like related to the government per diem, and I can't remember off the top of my head what that was, but ultimately it was the price that we are now moving forward with, but we actually are increasing the wages because we did see, we received feedback from those technicians that they would probably not continue once they were able to get business on the outside of the school. So, but our cost comparison still would be competitive, and actually there would be lower cost even with the increased wages that what we paid in this pilot. I can give you more information on the actual cost structure for them if you're interested. Yeah.
All right, let's give Chris a hand. And come find our presenters after the talk if you have questions. Let's see if we can get out of this node. All right, you're next? Yep. And up next we have Robert Drebelvis from LSHTM.
Cool. Thanks. Technically, you have Shafiur Rahaman, but Shafiur is in Zambia right now collecting data and couldn't be here, so we'll be presenting on his behalf. And this is work that we did about supporting water sanitation and hygiene in schools improvements through a massively open online course, or a MOOC, in the Philippines. And just acknowledging Shafiur's leading on this work, but along with partners at LSHTM, as well as our partners with Simio Innotech and GIZ. So pick a letter and we probably got it covered with all of those acronyms. This is probably an audience I don't need to do a lot of explaining on the challenges around WaSH in schools, so there it is. We know that it is important for the health and well-being of students, but sustainable service delivery models in schools remain a challenge. A number of barriers exist, including lack of resources, irregular monitoring and accountability, as well as kind of lack of capacity for schools as an institution to manage and maintain and improve their own WaSH facilities. We see kind of global WaSH coverage here. It's relatively similar. I didn't have numbers for the Philippines directly. Their national statistics are more or less in line with these, maybe water a little bit lower, but we see about half of schools with kind of global standards for hygiene facilities and somewhere between half and a quarter with water sanitation. So, wins in the Philippines. Since 2017, UNICEF and GIZ have supported the Philippines Department of Education, I'll refer to them as DepEd, in their national WIN strategy. Now, this is a national level program, contains a lot of different components. The overall structure of this is based on the UNICEF GIZ 3-star approach, which promotes kind of stepwise improvements in school WaSH services and kind of the institutionalization of managing and maintaining these facilities across the national strategy. So schools receive a star ranking anywhere from 0 to 3 stars, 0 stars being that it doesn't even meet JMP basic criteria for WaSH services in those schools, up to 3 stars where they fully meet the national standards, and they can kind of be anywhere in between those. There is an overall WIN score or WaSH score for the school, so everything put together, as well as a 3-star ranking for each of the water, sanitation, and hygiene components that make up the overall thing. So basically, everything gets rated out of 3, or 0 to 3, so technically 4. So 2 key parts of this national WIN strategy that are important. One is the annual monitoring that's done. All schools self-report kind of it's a national reporting system for 17 different WINS domains within the school. And this data is used both to define the star ranking, but for the national government to track and monitor progress on WIN status within these schools. The second part of this kind of national strategy is this massively open online course. This was developed by a GIZ Fit for School program and CMEO Innotech, and it's freely accessible for all educational staff in the country to enroll and go through this. The focus is really on guidance in implementing and maintaining these national WIN standards in the school. So in the kind of some of the specifics within the Philippines is all schools need to have a group hand washing station. They need to have group hand washing kind of events at least once per day. I know the hand washing better than the other ones, so I can freewheel those. But all of these domains have very specific activities that go with them. What we were able to do is pull together, that slide. We wanted to assess the relationship between school level participation in this MOOC with their school WIN status. Given both, we have kind of a rare opportunity, a national level data set running from 2017 to 2022 is the most recent one. And we were able to link that up with the kind of national, with the participation data from the MOOC. There were 2 primary outcomes I'm going to talk through. One is changes in star ranking over this period of time. So we just looked at the numbers, so anywhere from 0 to 3, and modeled that difference based on school participation in the MOOC. And then the second models that we did were binary logistic regression models, where we just looked, did things get better based on participation in the MOOC? Just another important point here, just walking through this because everything's going to look doubled in a second. We have 2 things that could happen with this MOOC. Well, 3 things. Nobody could participate in the MOOC at the school. We could find in schools that someone participated in the MOOC but didn't complete it and get their certificate. And third, we have at least one teacher or one school staff who fully completed the MOOC and got their certificate. So we've got all of these, and we're looking at our various domains. So just a quick kind of overview of what this star ranking was. In 2017, 2018, about 90% of schools had a 0-star ranking this is for the overall WINS score. By 2021/2022, about 55% of these schools had a 0-star ranking. We saw the biggest growth in the 2-star ranking. Now we had about 31% of schools, with a small sliver of schools, around 8%, reaching that full national standards. When it comes to the MOOC participation, we were able to pull together data and match them across this for 28,000 schools. So we have a huge data set here. We are missing data on about 15,000 schools, so we're not covering everybody, but this is what we got. No staff were enrolled in this MOOC in about 80% of the schools that we had available data on. 5% of these schools, 5% of schools had at least one person enroll in the MOOC but not complete it. And then another 16% had at least one person in the school enroll and complete, and probably has a little certificate somewhere about being in the MOOC. So what does this mean in terms of changes in star ranking? So this is looking at this kind of continuous measure of 0 to 3, and just a simple linear regression model, mostly because we can figure out how the multinomial logistic regression work. But MOOC participation was associated with a small improvement in average mean star ranking between 2017 and 2022. So overall, kind of for schools where someone enrolled in this MOOC, there was an improvement of about 0.14 on this 3-point scale. Very small, not even a full point, but I'm trying to do that math in my head. About 1/6 of a star. If that's right, then good job. If not, don't tell me later. Completed, relatively similar. Both of these confidence intervals. We saw smaller improvements seen for water and sanitation, some of which didn't meet our thresholds of significance. And finally, we saw the largest improvements specifically in the WINS domains related to hygiene. Here, we saw schools improving more or less kind of at the same magnitude of the overall change, suggesting any improvement at the school level is really being driven by improvements in school level hygiene. Okay, now we're talking about odds ratios, so we're all now a little bit more comfortable moving into odds ratios domains. But I made a forest plot because I've never been able to make one before, but I had a lot of odds ratios, so here we go. This is the odds that a school would improve its star ranking between 2017 and 2022 based on whether or not someone had enrolled in the MOOC but not completed, or if someone at the school had completed this MOOC. And what we see here, kind of relatively similar pattern. It's relatively consistent, but improvements were associated with both enrollment and completion with the MOOC. So for example, schools in hygiene were the kind of odds that a school would have improved its star ranking between 2017 and 2022 were about 1.7, 1.6 if someone had completed the MOOC, about 1.3 if someone had enrolled in the MOOC. We do see a few of these odds ratios not meeting our thresholds of statistical significance, mostly around schools where someone enrolled but did not complete in the MOOC. And these were in sanitation and hygiene, and that enrollment alone wasn't necessarily associated with significant improvements. Kind of an indication here that kind of the completion is a key part of this. I'm not going to go through this next one. So what does this actually mean? Talked about a lot of data. I want to make reference to a really nice systematic review that was looking at kind of the factors associated with sustainable service delivery by Pew and colleagues, or some of whom are in the back of the room here, and really looking at what are the factors that are associated with sustained WaSH improvements in schools. And thinking of this in kind of three key domains: resources, information, and some type of accountability mechanisms. So when we look at what's normally tested, most of the interventions are primarily kind of in that kind of most WINS interventions, the other one we saw earlier aside, are really focusing on providing resources. There might be some link with information, some link with accountability, but we're really focusing most of our interventions on providing resources to schools. Our study was kind of doing something, we were looking at an intervention that kind of fell outside of this. There's no resources that were part of this intervention. It really is focusing on providing information to the schools so that they can manage it, and providing these kind of accountability mechanisms through this national monitoring system. But we do see a few kind of limitations with this. We saw some larger and more robust changes in hygiene star ranking associated with this, but limited progress on water and sanitation, which kind of makes sense. Improving water and sanitation at a school level likely takes a bit more resources than improving your hygiene services or kind of instituting a kind of behavior change programs. It's something schools can necessarily manage without a major influx of these external resources that are likely necessary for kind of more large-scale infrastructural improvements at the school level. We did see improvements for both enrollment and completion in the MOOC, but some indication that kind of really completing this overall engagement in this kind of capacity building strategy, the program, is associated with kind of larger and more consistent improvements. So the MOOC plus the routine monitoring here, these are incredibly low-cost interventions, especially when you're implementing them at a national scale, and could be a strategy for improving kind of WINS services globally, understanding the unique context of the Philippines, where things like smartphone and the internet are readily accessible. This was a unique opportunity for us to use this kind of national level data to look at kind of long-term trends, and hopefully, we understand that this is an observational study, all of the limitations that I won't go through to a room of scientists, but hopefully things that we can start looking at in future studies, so prospectively monitoring the impact of this. So, thank you.
Questions?
Ron Kelly.
I just had a question. I know the resources bubble was X'd out, but I'm wondering if any of your students or whoever analyzed this data looked at soap and whether that was involved in the hygiene at all, or whether it was literally just like more hand washing with water, or like why did what aspects of hand washing improved without the input of resources?
Yeah, good question, and one that I wish we had an answer to. We were given the star ranking, we weren't given the individual components, so we know what the star ranking was. So yeah, I don't know exactly what part of this was driving those improvements in score. We just know that it got better between these points in time. Yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah, I can do it.
Can you say when the MOOC was introduced during that time period? You might have said that.
Yeah, sorry. It was rolled out over kind of multiple waves, so it wasn't necessary. It started sometime, I think, around 2018 was when they had their first cohort going through the MOOC. We weren't able to get school temporally disaggregated data on when people participated in the MOOC, and we only had kind of the school WaSH status at those kind of two anchor times. So this is what it was in 2017, this is 2022. We know sometimes somebody participated in this MOOC that's gone through, I think by now they're on their sixth kind of cohort of people moving through there. It's run relatively frequently with a pause during COVID. So. We weren't necessarily able to look at this. This was all kind of making, primarily the way we're adjusting for that is through the covariates. We have tried to explore some of this. The challenge is this, because this is national level data and it's handed over to us, we only have so many variables. And the minute we try to kind of dig into some of these other interesting questions, we lose a lot of our sample size. So we are hoping to look at that a little bit more. Good question. Ellie? Yeah, again, I think it'd be really fantastic to look at kind of MOOC enrollment over time and see if that has gone up, or if more and more people are starting to enroll with these, or if there are, what we know is they participated. The drivers of that we don't have information on. So there could be, I mean, I think opportunities for incentivizing participation in this MOOC, maybe linking that with additional resources at the school, but overall, like a lot of questions, good observation. It does seem relatively low, but we are seeing consistently participation in this is associated with kind of better improvement, assuming it's not due to some other systematic issue that we have no control of. So thanks.
And up next, we've got Sarah Bick from LSHTM.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Sarah Bick. I am presenting on the impact evaluation from the Project WaSH intervention you heard about earlier. So this is a cluster-randomised trial evaluating the impact of WaSH in schools on child health and school attendance in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And this was led by the London School. So what do we know about WaSH in schools before conducting this study? Well, the main message across the published literature is that the evidence for the impact of WaSH in schools on the health and education of school children is quite mixed. Systematic reviews report that while there have been some reductions in diarrhea, respiratory illness, and transmitted helminths, this is by no means universal. There are multiple rigorous randomized trials that observed few or no impacts on child health, and very few observed significantly lower overall absence rates. And it seems that the evidence for school-based menstrual hygiene management is even more limited, although this is increasing. So we set out to add to that evidence base by evaluating a large-scale urban WaSH in schools intervention in Addis Ababa on health and education. We evaluated impacts on older children, so these are children aged 7 to 16, and this included pupil-reported illness, absence, subjective well-being, and menstrual health outcomes. And we also conducted a sub-study among kindergarten children. This was presented on in the poster session yesterday. So if you didn't get to see that, please ask me about it later. So Project WaSH, as we heard, stands for WaSH in Schools for Everyone, implemented by SPLASH in partnership with the government of Ethiopia. And this is a very large-scale WaSH program targeting every public primary school and kindergarten in the city over a 5-year period. So this is around 450,000 children targeted. And the intervention includes infrastructure improvements, including new or refurbished toilets, water storage and filtration systems, these very colourful drinking water and hand washing stations that were custom designed, and some nudges, so mirrors above hand washing facilities, posters, and these colourful vests for children to wear to promote hand washing amongst their peers. And then these improvements are combined with a behavior change program focusing on student hygiene clubs to promote change among their peers, annual soap drives, school-wide event days, and menstrual health education and a peer mentoring program. So there's lots more components that you'll have to ask the Splash team about because I can't remember all of them. So the study design that we used to evaluate this intervention was a parallel 2-arm cluster randomized controlled trial conducted over the course of one single academic year with schools as the study clusters. And so we enrolled a subset of the schools that were receiving the program in our evaluation. And we randomly selected 60 schools from across the city. You can see the distribution, the locations of the schools there, the intervention in blue and the control schools in red. And these were schools serving children in grades 2 through 8 or ages 7 to 16. We also oversampled schools to account for potential loss of clusters during the study. And then we randomly allocated these schools either to receive the intervention in the 2021 and 2022 academic year or the following year as our control group. And randomization was stratified by the size of the school and presence of kindergarten classes. Within each participating school, we aimed to enroll around 100 pupils aged 7 to 16, and we did this by randomly selecting between 2 and 4 classes from grades 2 through 8, and following up the entire class over the course of the academic year. And our study followed a kind of open cohort design where those who joined the school midway through the year or who dropped out of school early were still included in our analysis when they were present at the school. And this also meant that those who were absent from our initial enrollment surveys were enrolled at a later point, and we could also track their absence from as long as they'd been in the school. So this is our data collection. It began with a detailed enrollment survey at the start of the academic year, and this took place while the intervention was being rolled out to intervention schools. And then we followed this with 4 unannounced visits to the selected classrooms, all post-intervention. And then at each of these repeated visits, we collected our primary outcomes, which were roll call absence, so checking who's in attendance at each unannounced visit. And then among those present, pupil reported respiratory illness in the past 7 days and diarrhea in the past 7 days. And then our secondary outcomes were pupil reported absence in the past week among those present at the follow-up visits. Pupil reported respiratory illness and diarrhea both in the past 2 days. And then just at our final follow-up, we collected our well-being and menstrual health outcomes, and these were restricted to particular groups of eligible pupils. So among pupils aged 11 to 16, they completed the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire. And then among post-menarcheal girls aged 10 to 16, they completed the Self-Efficacy in Addressing Menstrual Needs scale, which measures girls' confidence in addressing their menstrual needs, and the Menstrual Practice Needs scale, a measure of how well the girls' menstrual practices are able to meet their needs. So assessment of impact of the intervention on our primary outcomes and our repeated measures took the form of mixed effects logistic regression modeling, adjusting for clustering at both school and pupil levels. And assessment of impact on the measures at the final follow-up only was used linear regression modeling, adjusting for clustering at the school level. All our models adjusted for stratification variables, and then we had several further models making adjustments for grade, pupil gender, time point, and the location of the school in the sub-city. We pre-registered our analysis plan, so please check that out. It includes a lot of further detail on all of the subgroup analyses, the sensitivity analyses we conducted, and some additional outcomes I don't have time to talk about. So what did we find? Firstly, we reviewed the implementation of Project WaSH and found that it was implemented with high fidelity. However, the sanitation infrastructure component was delivered by the Ethiopian government, and it followed a slightly different timeline to our evaluation, with study schools only receiving this after we'd completed the evaluation. So unfortunately, we were only able to really evaluate a water and hygiene intervention in these schools. So in our evaluation, we enrolled 60 schools, none of them dropped out. Baseline factors were balanced across arms, and we met our sample size of around 100 pupils per school. And we saw a high level of attendance across both study arms. Most of our participants were included in our analysis because of our open cohort design, and very few of them dropped out of school during the study. Among our primary outcomes, we observed a significant impact on pupil-reported illness, respiratory illness in the past 7 days, a 17% reduction in odds in the intervention group versus the control group in our fully adjusted model, but this was consistent across all our models with various adjustments. And no evidence of impacts on roll call absence or pupil-reported diarrhea. Should also note there's quite a high prevalence of respiratory illness, about 26% overall, and a much lower prevalence of diarrhea. These are the gender disaggregated findings. There was evidence of differential impact of the intervention by gender for pupil-reported respiratory illness, with greater effects observed among boys, but no evidence of differential effects for the other primary outcomes. And then among our secondary outcomes, we observed a small 3 percentage point significant increase in menstrual hygiene self-efficacy on the Salmon scale, no impacts on other outcomes, and also no impacts on pupil-reported absence and the other illness measures in our secondary outcomes. So in summary, this study provides evidence that a comprehensive WaSH in schools intervention implemented at scale across an urban population centre can impact respiratory illness among school children. Our 17% reduction in odds is quite consistent with a recent systematic review on hand hygiene and ARI, which included studies in the school setting. And we think this is particularly relevant in the context of COVID-19, when the prevalence was very high, and future research on WaSH in schools should aim to differentiate pandemic from seasonal infection. The mixed impacts of the WISE intervention we observed are also quite consistent with the existing literature, and the much lower prevalence of diarrhea and pupil-reported absence might have contributed to this. So many thanks to all of our co-authors, contributors, our funders, SIF, Splash, implementing partner, and our data collection partner, Holster International. Thanks for listening.
Y'all are going to make me run the mic around, aren't you? Okay. Any questions?
Thank you, Sarah, for the presentation. One methodological question. Was there any cooling period in between the intervention before you measure the outcome to avoid any reactive outcomes? And you said the 100 school students per cluster. Was it the same students over time, baseline and inline, or was it just the cluster of the students that you measure? And for the Splash colleague, what was the frequency of exposure with the students, the number of times the students exposed with the intervention?
Thank you. On the first question, so we began our follow-up data collection in, I think, March 2022, and the intervention, all the components delivered by Splash were all in place by January 2022. So there was a few months in between, so it would have been quite well established in the schools by that point. And yes, we did follow the same students over time. We enrolled the entire class, and then we, when we went back to the schools, we visited those particular classrooms, and we were able to link data from each of the data collection rounds to the specific student.
I think it's interesting that you saw an increase in confidence, but not sort of actual experience of meeting menstrual related needs. I wondered if you looked at the MPNS subscales, given that there are some that are more relevant to school and not. And also, I'm just thinking through the SAMs, I don't think there's that many items that ask about privacy in school sanitation. So I just wondered if like some of those individual items might have indicated why you weren't seeing a difference in actual sort of experience, if that was driven by girls don't have a change in their access to materials, or if you had a chance to unpack that a bit more.
Thank you. Yeah, we did look at all the subscales for the 2 menstrual health outcomes. From what I recall, there were no significant differences among any of the subscales, and I can't really remember if any of the MPNS ones had greater or lower effect sizes in general. But I think in terms of the salmon scale, I think the subscale that had the greatest kind of effect size was about menstrual health preparation and maintenance. Yeah, perhaps the girls at these schools, because they did still receive the other menstrual health components, do have higher confidence in preparing for menstruation, but unfortunately they didn't get the improvements in the sanitation that would enable them to have a safe and private place to change materials at school.
Other questions?
Thanks, Sarah. You talked a lot about the health outcomes that you measured, and it seems like there were some null findings, although the respiratory diseases seems somewhat positive. Could you talk a little bit about some of the behaviors that you may have measured, maybe what I would classify as intermediate outcomes that were as a result of the splash intervention?
Yeah, so we performed a very light touch process evaluation, and we weren't able to ourselves assess behaviors. The splash team do monitor behavior in terms of observations of hand washing. I think at the time when we did that, we only had that data for the intervention schools in our study and not for the control schools, so we weren't able to look at that and make any comparisons. But maybe by this point there might be some, so yeah, we'd have to check with the splash team about what they've observed in terms of increases in hand washing behavior at the schools. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I don't know if I missed it, but I think you mentioned that there was an increase in the number of pupils with respiratory infections. Was that for the intervention school or?
So it's a reduction in respiratory illness, self-reported, but not in diarrhea.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, let's give Sarah a hand.
Thank you.
All right, and last up we have Gracie Hornsby from Stanford. If I can find. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I feel so privileged to go after so many people talking about maintenance today, and we're going to talk about it some more. So my name is Gracie Hornsby. I'm a PhD candidate at Stanford University, advised by Jenna Davis in the back. And today we'll be talking about the evaluation of the WaSH Up India program. And this is a prospective cluster-randomized trial aiming to evaluate the impact of both education and infrastructure O&M on student knowledge and behavior. So the study site for this evaluation is Sitapur district of Uttar Pradesh, India. And this is a relatively rural district for a little extra context. We randomly selected a sample of 200 schools for our study, and then randomly selected a gender segregated sample of 40 grade 1 students and 40 grade 4 students for inclusion. But first we need to talk about and understand the interventions that we are implementing. So the WaSH Up curriculum is a 12-week play-based program designed by experts at Sesame Workshop, and then delivered by teachers who are trained by Sesame trainers. And importantly, it includes 6 weeks of introducing new material, and then it includes 6 weeks of reinforcing that material, since we are working with relatively young students here. And the focus of the program is on hand washing, toilet use, and other relevant personal hygiene behaviors. The second intervention that we're assessing is our WaSH. I don't even have to define O&M. You are all O&M experts by now. But our model is a model where private cleaners are contracted by a third-party agency, and this is a central third-party agency that manages all of these contracts. And these Swachhita Sathis work for 2 hours daily at each of our study schools. And so the central agency also takes care of provisioning the relevant cleaning materials for our cleaners to use. So the Swachhita Sathis focus on our hand washing stations, toilets, which were particularly important in our formative work and difficult to get cleaned, and then the hand washing station. And their responsibilities include cleaning around these facilities, making sure that the relevant consumables like soap and water are available for students on a daily basis. And then very importantly, this accountability note, thank you for putting up the RIA framework, and the information piece of reporting to headmasters when something is non-functional. And so to measure both the individual and combined impacts of these interventions, we implemented a 4-arm design where 50 schools in our control arm receive no intervention, 50 schools receive only the WaSH Up program, the curricular intervention, 50 schools receive only the O&M intervention, and then in the middle of this Venn diagram, 50 schools receive both the curricular intervention and the O&M service. All treatments were randomly assigned to these schools. And prior to the to intervention delivery and launch of the study, schools also received baseline infrastructure upgrades so that non-functionality or absence of these facilities wouldn't be a significant barrier to students practicing these behaviors. And others have already highlighted this today, but the existing literature on the effectiveness of WaSH in Schools programming is mixed. So we are excited that this, to the best of our knowledge, will be the first study of its kind to implement the 4-arm research design for the individual and combined impacts, particularly at this scale in 200 schools. So our primary outcomes for this study are WaSH knowledge and attitudes, behavior, infrastructure cleanliness, and consumables availability, but we will focus on the first 3 for the purpose of today's presentation. We collected this data through a student survey, a teacher survey, unannounced infrastructure observations on a 2 to 3 week frequency, and unannounced student behavior observations for hand washing on a 3 to 5 week frequency. Baseline data was collected prior to any intervention delivery. Midline data was collected at the midpoint of curriculum delivery. Remember that reinforcement piece, so we were at the middle of curriculum delivery, and then we can celebrate that endline data is currently being collected, so thank you to our team in India. And so today, I will actually be presenting data from our baseline to midline data set that still remains blinded. It is important for our entire research team to remain blinded until our endline data set is in and we're able to pre-register and then execute our analysis. But we will have so much fun today talking about for what we expect to see and then what we are actually seeing so far and how those expectations in reality do or don't match up. So the 3 indicators that I will, or the 3 kind of classes of indicators that I'll present on today are student knowledge, infrastructure cleanliness, and then student behavior. So these are our expectations, with student knowledge on the y-axis and time from baseline to midline on the x-axis. We might expect to see something that looks like this: 2 higher performing arms and then 2 lower performing arms. And this is because we'd expect to see more improvement on student knowledge in arms receiving the WaSH Up intervention, whereas we don't expect to see those same we don't see the same pathways to change in arms we're not receiving WaSH Up, such as O&M and control arms. Similarly, with infrastructure cleanliness on the y-axis and time from baseline to midline on the x-axis, we'd expect to see a somewhat similar trend in our infrastructure outcomes, with 2 high-performing arms and 2 lower-performing arms. However, we would expect this to be different arms. We would now expect to see our O&M arms potentially performing higher when it comes to infrastructure cleanliness. But again, we don't see those pathways to change in the wash up only or the control arm. And why I set that up as the context is because behavior outcomes are harder to predict, as many people in this room know. We could expect that maybe a control arm would show little or no growth over time. And if our hypothesis about the synergy between education and infrastructure holds, then we could expect to see maybe one highest performing arm rather than this stratification between 2 and 2. However, we leave a question mark in the middle because the performance of those single intervention arms are much harder to predict, and particularly if they will significantly outperform our control arm. And now we're going to do what you're all waiting for, which is we're going to talk about real data. So as a reminder, this is what we might expect for student knowledge. So the student knowledge outcome that I've chosen for today is student knowledge of germs. We asked students a series of 2 questions. First, have you heard the word germs before? And if they told us yes, then we asked them, what can you tell us about germs? What are they? And forgive my Hindi, I cannot do this for you in Hindi today. But particularly, we are interested in students who gave us scientifically supported information about germs. So the percentage of students who supplied that will be graphed on the y-axis. So as a quick reminder, colors do not coincide with the expected graphs. We are blinded, just enjoy the pretty colors. But we see about what we expect here. We see the stratification between 2 higher and 2 lower performing arms, and this is a significant difference. We performed cluster-adjusted difference in differences tests, and arms 1 and 3 did significantly outperform arm 4, which we've used as our reference group for all analyses, since it consistently was our lowest performing arm across all of our metrics. So we're using it as our reference group for now. And I've used student knowledge as an illustrative example here, but this trend is quite common across many of our knowledge outcomes from baseline to midline. So let's look at school WaSH infrastructure as well. Again, this is what we might expect to see. So we're looking at the cleanliness of student toilets today. We asked our observers if they observed a lot, some, or very little or none of the following 4 indicators. First, visible feces. Everyone loves that being part of their job to look for. Flies and other pests, mud, dirt, or trash, and then unpleasant odor. They scored these on a scale from 1 to 3, as shown above, and then we added these up to make a composite indicator on toilet cleanliness, meaning that a higher score indicates a cleaner toilet facility. And so, again, we see about what we would expect to see. We're showing cleanliness on the y-axis, and then our 4 rounds of observation between baseline and midline, exclusive of baseline and midline, on the x-axis. And so once again, we see this trend of 2 higher and 2 lower performing arms. However, the very keen people here might notice the colors are different. These are different arms than in our knowledge outcomes. It was arms 1 and 3 that performed high for knowledge, and now it is arms 2 and 3 that perform well on infrastructure. And so again, I've used toilet cleanliness as, thank you, toilet cleanliness as a illustrative example here, but this is again quite common across our infrastructure outcomes. And now we get to the troubled child of student behavior that's a little more difficult to talk about. And as a reminder, this is where we're looking for maybe this one highest performing arm. And today we'll talk about observer documented student hand washing with soap after toilet use. And so we feel a strength of our study is that we collected both reported and observational data. So please ask me about the reported data after this because I do not have time to tell you about it now. But to collect this data, our team conducted 2-hour-long hand washing observations at the hand washing station nearest the toilet facility. They noted if the student used the bathroom, if they washed their hands, and then what they used to wash their hands. Okay, so this is messier, but let's dive in. So the solid colors, or the solid color lines, represent the actual percentage of students who practice hand washing with soap after leaving the toilet facility. And then the dotted line is the lowest smoothing line to show the smoothed out kind of the overall trend of each study arm. And so I want to highlight 2 important observations here. The first one, you all are very data literate, so you have seen there is not a clear positive trend in this data like we're seeing in some of our other outcomes. And then the second observation is just that the absolute level of hand washing with soap is quite low at the moment. We're seeing in our reference arm as low as about 5% up to maybe 26, 27%. And so the very important caveat that I need to give you here is that that provision of soap is not part of either of our interventions. That is the responsibility of each school. So we do have data on soap availability. It was just not in shape to include in this presentation today, but we will stratify by that in the future and see if this trend looks different among students who did have soap available to them. Okay, so some key takeaways. Wasn't this so fun with blinded data? We still have takeaways. Thank you. So we do have evidence that that student knowledge was likely impacted by one of these interventions. And similarly, we do have evidence that school wash infrastructure cleanliness was likely impacted by one of these interventions. So why do we not see as clear of a signal on student behavior at this time? Well, the first could just be that our hypothesis about the synergy between education and infrastructure just doesn't hold. However, I'm a PhD student, so I have lots of other ideas as well. We could also speculate that student behavior might take more time to show a clear signal than knowledge or infrastructure. Following the CAPS and other behavior change frameworks, we see that behavior stems from maybe previous changes in attitude as well as knowledge, so maybe that comes later. And we do also, and we're receiving our endline data very shortly, and we would hypothesize that maybe we would see a clearer signal on knowledge at endline if indeed it is a delayed process for behavior change to take place. We could also say that maybe education and an enabling environment implemented together are still not enough if a student is experiencing norms in their home environment that are counter what they're learning at school, that maybe only implementing in the school environment may not be strong enough to overcome that influence at home. But good news, we've also collected data on the home environment, so we'll stratify by that or control for the home environment in the future and certainly see if these trends look different. And then I'll just leave you with a cliffhanger because our endline data is coming very soon and I look forward to presenting this to you in the future as well. But it wouldn't be complete without a thank you to the Stanford research team, past, present, and future, many of which are in the room. The Oxford Policy Management research team, which couldn't be here today, but were integral to this research. Our implementation team, Swati, wave your hand in the back of the room. Thank you very much. Our data collection team, and then our really large data collection team that this would not be possible without. And of course, thank you to our funders at World Vision. Thank you.
This is really interesting, Gracie. Excellent presentation. Thanks so much. I already had one of my questions answered by whispering to Jenna about water availability, but I have a second question for you. Did you measure hand hygiene behavior before eating?
So this is a fantastic question, and this was on our learning agenda prior, but logistically collecting the data ended up being just really unreliable. So the midday meal in India is implemented at a certain time, but it would have probably tripled or quadrupled the size of our data collection team, or really heavily reduced the number of times that we could collect data. So we made the decision to prioritize hand washing after toilet use, since we could observe that at multiple times in the day. But someone else should do a study on after eating. That's a great idea.
Other questions?
Did the O&M treatment, I got confused a little bit. Did the O&M treatment include the private contractor providing soap for hand washing or just soap for cleaning of the facilities?
Yeah, thanks for making this clarification. So the third-party agency supplies relevant cleaning materials for the toilets in particular, so like disinfectant, things that our Swachhasathis might use. We do not provision soap for hand washing, which is why we feel it's really important to stratify by that in the analysis. Yeah.
Other questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation. Actually, this is not a question, but I don't know if you were here for the school wash side session earlier this week, but like 3 or 4 ladies presented, and all of them, I believe, said that about 25 to 30% of kids wash their hands. So clear, and that's basically what you also presented. And so kids don't wash their hands, and that's just a fact. So I don't know what we're going to do about that, but which I know is why you guys are studying this, and that's fantastic. The other thing is that going to, the absenteeism study, talking about respiratory infection and hand washing, and after COVID, a lot of government, after COVID, whatever that means, a lot of governments stopped requiring group hand washing. And I think the data about illness is really important there for government, but I also think just coming from care that whether or not there's like an effect on absenteeism or disease or anything, like we need to know how to do O&M for schools, because like kids deserve soap and hand washing. So anyway, thank you so much for your presentation, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
Other questions? I want to know how many people wash their hands at this conference. Didn't someone do a hidden camera? I don't know if it was Amy or Matt or someone. Ah, okay, good to know, good to know.
Ben, you should report them.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, let's give all of our presenters another hand. Thanks everyone for coming.